right, mic check, mic check. More the Masters podcast. Y'all's main, of course. I got a special guest across from me, man. Got the DA, Jared Williams. How you doing, man?
What's good, man?
I'm doing great. First and foremost, I want to thank you for putting time aside to come do the podcast. I know there's been, I don't know if you know, because you're a busy man. It's been like, to me, maybe like 2 years in the making. And I say that I've been saying that a lot lately because I was taught I was lying about something one time, and I don't think people realize like how much it takes sometimes to actually get schedules aligned so you can do this type of stuff, so you can do it the right way and not just rush it. But I remember, I think you had first got in office, and a guy named Jarrell kept saying, "I want you to have the DA. I want you to have the DA. I got a homeboy in this camp." I said, "All right, look, whatever you want, right?" And of course, like I said, busy things came up. This crime, all this other stuff coming up, and then one random day, I don't know if you remember, but I did Ben Hassan on my podcast.
Yeah.
So he came to my house one day. He just was in the garage, and he said, I ended up mentioning like, "Yeah, I'm trying to get the DA on." He's like, "Oh yeah." He just called you like right then and there, and then you called back, and that was it. Like it was just that simple. So shout out to you, man, because I know that's a very, very busy job. Before I get into your background and stuff, I wanna know, like, just tell me, what is like the job of the DA?
Sure. So the district attorney is the chief law enforcement officer for the circuit. So our circuit is now Richmond and Burke. When I ran, it was Richmond, Burke, and Columbia. Okay. And so what we do, if you're doing it the right way, is whenever there's an arrest or an investigation, sheriff's office, does their work. They gather their evidence, they write a report, and then they submit all those documents and all the evidence to us. And we look at it, and really what you have to do is you have to answer 3 questions in the affirmative. So number 1, did law enforcement follow the law themselves? We all have these constitutional rights that are triggered by an arrest,
right?
And law enforcement has to do the job the right way, or else the case is gone. I say if you're doing it the right way, that's how you do it, because that's not always the way it was done before.
Got you.
And so that's question number 1. Question number 2 is there a basis to believe that the person accused of the crime actually committed the crime? And you've heard that before. It's called probable cause.
Right.
And then the third question is specific to prosecutors. We have to ask, well, do we either have, or are we likely to have in the future, proof beyond a reasonable doubt? Because probable cause is it's a really easy standard. It's just more likely than not. But beyond a reasonable doubt is the highest standard in the legal system. So, for instance, if the government's going to take someone's kids away from them and terminate their parental rights, the standard for that is clear and convincing evidence. Beyond a reasonable doubt is even higher than that, right? And so, really, if you can answer those first 3 questions in the affirmative, then the prosecutor, the DA, has a lot of discretion as to what happens next. We largely decide whether and how we're going to charge a case, what court it should go into. We're the ones that make a recommendation to the judge about whether someone should be held in confinement waiting for their trial or whether they should be released on bond. We are investigating the case as well, kind of for our own purposes, because, like I said, the standard's a little higher than what your law enforcement officers in the street are working on. But we decide whether a case should be negotiated, or likely if it's going to go to trial. How much leniency do you want to give somebody? Do you want to give them a second chance, or do you want to take them all the way, throw the book at them? That's all within the discretion of the DA.
Got you. Okay. Sounds like a lot. It's not a clear-cut answer. Like some jobs are like you do X, Y, and Z. This is like, it seems like a lot of extraneous circumstances around even the one thing y'all might do that day. The one decision, whether you want to give somebody leniency. I feel like you have to take that into account with so many other things.
Yeah. I mean, it's a lot of different interests, man. So you have to think about a lot of different, just the decisions that we make in this office impact more than just the person whose name is on the file, right? Mm-hmm. So, Jared Williams might have committed the crime, but does Jared Williams have kids? Does he have a mom that's going to miss him? Does he have a job that's going to be missing an employee? Does he have a mortgage he's got to pay? Whatever it might be. And so you have to recognize that the decisions that you make are all they're all connected, and so you're creating a ripple effect. And part of what I believe my job is to make sure that those ripple effects don't create more crime in the process, because a lot of times people don't think about it. But for the longest time, they were saying, well, mandatory minimums, let's lock up people for drugs, right? Nonviolent drug offenses, lock them up. Well, the ripple effect is that's a whole generation of kids who were raised without their fathers, who were raised without someone in the home who could provide for them or teach them how to be a man. And now you're wondering why you've got some weak men growing up, right?
Yeah.
And so it's all about, if you're going to do it the right way, finding ways to prosecute crimes that actually make people better and less likely to commit crimes, as opposed to creating the conditions that make them more likely to come back.
That's actually a good answer. That's very, very detailed too. It's layered. There's a lot of layers of that. So
it kind of works on the other end too, though. So I take a lot of heat sometimes because I will plead down a case if I think the evidence, if for whatever reason we think we're not going to win that case. And the reason you might do that is different, because the ripple effect on the opposite side is this. So it's popular and probably politically smart for me if I just try the case and lose it, because then I can say, well, hey, I wanted the max punishment and I took him to trial and the jury let him go, right? But the problem is that doesn't make the neighborhood where that guy is out here committing crimes any safer, right? So it might be a serious charge like a murder, where the person could face life in prison. But if I'm looking at the evidence, having been a prosecutor and been a defense attorney, if I'm looking at it and I'm saying, nah, we're not going to win that one. But the guy, what I can prove is a burglary, well, then it makes sense to get the sentence on a burglary, and it might be less. It's not going to be life, because you can't get life on a burglary. But that protects the kids in that neighborhood, and it protects the single parent that's trying to keep their kids safe better than if we just take it to trial and lose. And so again, the ripple effects can work the opposite way.
Yeah, I've always wondered that when I see somebody have multiple charges like that, but then just one sticks, because we don't see the full story. Like even because I'm a criminal justice major, even when you go down there and you can get all this information is free. You can get the write letter to the judge, you can get the sentencing, all that stuff is just free information. You have to pay nothing but printing the paper. So you go down there and you see it, but even with all the information, there's still like bits and pieces you just don't know, because it's not in there. It's not saying why this murder charge just didn't go through or whatever. You don't know why behind it. There's no paperwork for that to say, hey, I know you're wondering, but this is why. It's nothing like, you just got to know or you don't know.
I'll give you an example, man. So we had a case that's done now, so I can talk about it. But we're looking at it, and the way that it was presented to us when we got it from law enforcement was, well, there's a fingerprint, there's a shoe print, and there's an eyewitness. I mean, slam dunk case, right? Of course, indicted for murder, go forward. Well, fast forward, we're getting ready for trial, and the fingerprint doesn't match the defendant. The shoe print doesn't match his shoes. And the eyewitness is hiding out in another state, don't want to talk to us, right? But yeah, we're fairly confident this is the person who committed the crime, but we also know that he's not going to be convicted. And so the question is, do you recommend something that can at least protect the community for a little bit, or do you just wait and just try and appear tough and end up, him getting to walk through the street saying he beat a body?
Yeah.
And there's a lot of weak people who aren't willing to have that conversation because they're so afraid of what it looks like, that, the judge accepted that plea, let's say, and they're so afraid of the appearance and what they're going to say in the media that they're not thinking about how it impacts the community around that person and the kids that grow up next to him and the activity that he might be doing.
It makes sense. So normally I don't start that way, but I want them to get information from you that you know your stuff, right?
Yeah, we got deep real quick.
I know, right? Let me draw back a little bit. So just tell the people like about yourself. Where you from, your upbringing. Let's talk about that real quick.
Sure. So I'm from Augusta, born and raised. My dad is a pastor. Well, when I was growing up, he had a lot of jobs. So he was a pastor on Sundays, but he also worked at Augusta College, and he was a mechanic at night. So he worked a lot. And then my mom worked night shift at the hospital. She was an X-ray tech.
Okay.
But my dad started a ministry called Miracle Making Ministries, and it started off as an inner city mission, kind of helping people with rent assistance or transportation, food, whatever, programs for kids and things like that. But over the years, it has grown, and it's now an international mission so that serves people out in Africa, in South America, and in Eastern Europe. And so my mom actually works for the mission now, and she runs the Druitt Park Community Health Center, which is a resource for people who either don't have insurance or don't have enough insurance. Rather than going to the emergency room, they can get referred to the clinic, and there are doctors who work for free, who volunteer their time to help people who otherwise couldn't get good access to care.
Okay. Describe yourself. Like, how are you as a child? Like, you the the youngest sibling,
So
only sibling?
I am the youngest of two. My sister is older than me, and I point that out to her all the time. That she's the old one and I'm still young. And so she actually lives in Texas, and she's got two beautiful girls that I hope I get to go see soon. When this campaign is over, I'm gonna go. Go see them. And then I'm the youngest.
So what was that? Just your dynamic. I know earlier, just a minute ago, you were speaking about kids growing up without fathers or your dads due to crime, whatever the case may be. How was your relationship like with your parents, your mom, your dad? What was that like for you growing up?
I mean, it was good. So when you get to our age, you can look back and see how blessed and privileged you were. And I was definitely, I had a very privileged existence, and I see that and I know that. And I kind of knew it at the time because with my dad working in ministry, like I went to, a private school and kind of the way I was joking about it earlier is I went to school on the hill and went to church in the hood, and so I had kind of the sheltered experience at school, but then in the community, especially, every weekend we were doing some type of block party, doing something. And then where my dad's church was as well. I just got to see both sides of the community. And so I was really fortunate to have the parents I had, but of course at the time I didn't necessarily feel that way. And so we had I was probably the rebellious one of the two of us.
You seem so easygoing. It's kind of it's hard to see you rebelling right now.
Hey man, I'm really easy if you just leave me alone, let me do what I want to do.
So so when you say like rebelling, like was it like you wanted to do other stuff you thought I guess was cool at the time, but you maybe couldn't do it? Maybe parents were more strict, or just knew better to put you in those kind of situations.
Yeah, so my parents were pretty strict. They're super, like they didn't drink, they didn't cuss in the house. Like I grew up really kind of constricted like that, and we were at church every time the doors were open.
Oh wow!
Sometimes when the doors weren't open. And so
you say your dad's a pastor?
Yeah.
Okay. Oh wow. Yeah. I'm sorry.
So
I'm not saying I'm sorry. Hold up. Let me draw back. I've dealt with my grandparent being a pastor, and I was not really a fan of how much you had to go to church.
It feels like you're being force fed.
I felt like I was there more than I was home when I was with them. So I was like, I'm thinking to stay home.
Yeah.
Y'all can kick it.
Yeah. So I definitely kind of went my own way, and I had to learn the hard way that my life doesn't really work and it doesn't stay on the tracks if I'm not actually engaging with my faith and actually trying to be in God's will. But as a young person, I wasn't feeling that. I was trying to do whatever I could.
Yeah.
And I was, I wanted to have fun. I wanted to be with my boys. I wanted to do, crazy stuff. And so I'm very fortunate that I didn't have one of those negative encounters that I could have had.
Yeah. As a kid, you in school, you did any sports? Like what schools did you go to? Like what's your background in that?
Yeah, so I went to Westminster. So we didn't have a football team at the time. That there wasn't a football team, and I was like, I'm trying to look at something around here that was a comparable size to me. I was 300 plus pounds, so I was not very athletic, and So yeah, I'll just leave it. That was not athletic. I've been.
What attributed to that? Though? Like the weight? Like what attributed to you being? Because is that normal? Like you said you were 300 pounds in high school.
I was abnormally large. I think it was just I don't know. I just didn't.
You just chilled all the time? Like you just didn't do nothing? Or?
Man, I really love food. I still love food.
Okay, that makes sense. But like, so you're running a community, right? Being younger, what's define, I guess, Augusta to you in your eyes during their time of middle school, high school? Like how was it like versus now?
It felt like there was nothing to do. And I don't know if kids today still feel that, but at the time it was like you could go to the movies, you go to Applebee's. Like, what else are you going to do, you know? And so I remember feeling kind of constrained and being really ready to go to college and like really get out on my own. And I thought that I was ready for that. And then I learned that I was not ready for that.
That gotta suck. So you went to Westminster. You didn't go to no public school at all then?
Elementary school I did.
Okay. So, but most of your time was just ducked off pretty much. Mm-hmm. And what about college?
So I went to Georgia College in Milledgeville.
Okay.
So that was my first time being out of the house, kind of being on my own, and I definitely lived that part out.
Okay, cool.
Well, it was cool until grades came out.
What kind of student were you? That's a good question. What kind of student were you?
So I was the student that, like, with the exception of math, because I'm awful in math, for every other subject, I could just kind of show up and do all right. And so I kind of coasted through high school with that. And then I had one teacher in high school who knew my game, like he could just read me. And he would always say, it's like, that's not going to work in college. It's not going to work in college. You know, like, I can tell you didn't study for that test and you passed it, but it's not going to work in college. And sure enough, man, his words were prophetic. So that first semester, man, I very nearly got put out of school. That's how bad my grades were.
Jesus Christ.
Like, I had a 1.1. And then the second semester, you know, I got my act together and I had a 3.1. But like, it was just having to learn that I really had to work. Yeah. And I had to actually at least attend class, you know?
So, after, like, when you went to college, what you went to school for? What was your major?
I originally went for history, and then I ended up switching to political science.
What made the switch, or what was the reason behind that?
Man, all right. So one is I thought I wanted to be a professor, like be a history professor. And then I learned how hard that job is. Like, it's just, you're reading the most boring stuff, man. And you know, I think the professors in the history department really wanted to make a point to kind of weed people out, and they got me. But then also, I really wanted to graduate on time because I told you I had a rough first semester. And so in order to do that, I changed my major, and political science was just way more my speed.
Right.
Man. I loved learning about the people who thought up these different political systems. And I started to notice a trend as you're learning about all these political theorists. Most of them started out in law. And a lot of the people that you read about that changed the world around them, they all started out in law. And so that's how I ended up going the law school route.
Okay. So going to law school route, is that something you want to do? Like, you wanted to change the world, change the environment around your community? Was that like the first thing you thought when you went into law?
So I didn't necessarily know that I wanted to be a practicing lawyer. What I knew was the pattern I was seeing of people who had made a difference. And so I knew I at least wanted the legal education. And then, you know, one of my biggest, I can't call him a mentor because I don't know him, but one of my biggest role models was Barack Obama. Because when I was in college is when he ran for office the first time, ran for president the first time. And so just, I wanted to have that level of impact because he just really inspired me.
Speaking of Barack Obama, I'm gonna ask you, what do you feel y'all possess any similarities?
Man, I would hope so. I would hope so. I don't know that I can claim that. Someone else is going to have to claim that for me. But I guess, he started out in a really small community type role. He wasn't necessarily, he started out as a senator. He didn't start out as president. But I just feel like he was willing to look at his surroundings, which at that time was Chicago, and to say, I'm going to make some difference. And that's part of why I ran for district attorney, was because, I was comfortable in private practice. I was doing well. But I felt like there needed to be change. And I just felt like I can be that change. I can help bring that change along. Even if it's not a big thing, just trying to make a difference for the world around me, even if it's just our city.
Well, I don't think nothing wrong with that. I definitely would say just your poise. I think I see that when you said Barack Obama, I just started at the poise. And then some questions I have later on, I kind of see that resemblance somewhat. But I want to get into like the law right now. So I seen that, you posted it was something about being a DA's intern. I think you did like a 10-year challenge, something like that, right? So walk me through it. Tell me like how I know you went to school for political science and you wanted to get into law, but like, at what point did you become an intern for the DA, and then to even take that the step further to think you can do that or want to be in that field?
Yeah, man. So I started out. This would have been 2011, which was the summer after my first year of law school, and I was just coming back home, and I really wanted a legal job somehow. And so I took the internship at the DA's office, which isn't paid. So I would get to the courthouse at 8:30. I'd work until 5, and then I'd rush to my grandma's house, take off the suit, put on an apron, and go wait tables until about midnight. I would just do that all summer. And so that way I could learn, from the lawyers during the day, and then actually make some money at night. And so I actually did that for 2 summers. And my second summer, I was able to actually try cases and like be in court, and something that we call the Third Year Practice Act.
Okay.
But I guess the day that I decided I was going to be a prosecutor was actually during my first year interning. And what happened was we were in the Friday meeting, which is a weekly meeting of the attorneys in the DA's office. We still do it to this day. And I remember the prosecutors, the ADAs, were talking about a case. And in particular, they were talking about this kid who looked like you and I, and he had just graduated the University of Georgia, top of his class, and he had gotten a full ride scholarship to Georgia Tech in the engineering master's degree. Mm. And in the summer between graduating Georgia and starting at Georgia Tech, he gets pulled over in Evans with a gram of marijuana. Mm. And I just remember listening to the conversation of what the prosecutors were talking about, and it's like they didn't care at all that this guy was going to lose his scholarship, and he wasn't going to be able to become the engineer that he was called to be. That he wouldn't be able to build that generational wealth for his family the way he otherwise would have. They were just kind of mimicking the defense attorney for even asking that they dismiss the case. Mm. And I remember thinking then, well, if I become a defense attorney, I'm always going to have to ask a prosecutor to do something for my client. Whereas if I'm the prosecutor, I just get to say, you know what, I'm going to help this kid. And then, so that was the day I decided I was going to be a prosecutor. And then I really got frustrated when I realized that there were some people who were going to get their case dismissed to save their scholarship. They just had to look a certain way, or they had to have the right last name or come from the right side of the railroad tracks. And I did not like seeing how the justice system was not working the same way for different people. And so that's probably part of why I stepped away from the law for a little bit.
Okay, well, I mean, that's a common, I think, common practice for most people. They see something. I had a lawyer on here probably a couple years ago in the height of COVID, Bianca, and I think she even got into law because of something with her brother, and she practices law in Atlanta now and stuff like that. But a lot of times you see that it's a personal experience, epiphany, just something that happens. You're like, I have to do this, you know. So it's dope to hear that side of it, because I didn't really know. You say you didn't play sports. You know, some people competitive, you know. So I wasn't sure like your background, like where did law come in at. But now I'm seeing this the change, and then also another change. That's a change just in society wise. So
I eventually did play sports though.
Oh, you did?
Yeah. So not in high school, not in college, but so I told you I stepped away from the law when so I was an assistant district attorney, and I decided I was going to move out of the country. I moved to Spain, and I lived there for 2 years, dirt poor, like, yeah, I mean, like saving up coin change to go grocery shopping. But I was teaching. I was teaching as a public school teacher, and they would give you like a small stipend every month so that you could stay over there. And so they give you a visa. And so while I was over there, I found rugby, which I don't know if you...
I've seen. I don't know nothing about it. I'm not going to lie.
It's basically football without the pads, and the ball goes backwards instead of forwards.
That's what... Carlton, he was playing that in Fresh Prince. I don't know if you've seen the new Fresh Prince. that's what I remember.
It was only a matter of time before I got a Carlton joke. All right, man.
Oh, that's funny. So history wise, I like to do stuff like during the month for Black History now. You are Black History. Not sure if I know you know, but I'm not sure if you're familiar now. That's what they say about you. The first Black DA in Augusta. Like, how does that feel? What does that mean to you? Just don't take DA out of it, but take first Black. When you hear first Black, what comes to mind to you?
Responsibility.
Ooh.
It's just knowing that you've got to do it right, and you've got to be above reproach, and you've really got to try and bring some people with you too.
Yeah. I feel like it's first Black is one of them, like, I'm not gonna say damn if you do, damn if you don't, but it's hard because you're the first one. Mm-hmm. You know, so you kind of set the tone for anybody that may come after you. And then also, like, if it's not done before, like, that's just what it is until it's done again.
So let me tell you, bro. So my predecessor, the lady that I beat in 2020 to take this office, in 2019, her trial stats were like she won 48% of the cases. Her office won 48% of the cases. Now, fast forward, we have COVID, the court shut down. The first full year of jury trials, we won 80% of the cases, right, at trial. So by any metric, we're better at convicting criminals than ever before, mm-hmm. right? But what do you always hear? Soft on crime, thug sympathizer, not tough enough, doesn't lock up enough people. It's all for some people, perception is reality. Yeah. Now the difference is, while the same time that if you're out here shooting at people or messing with kids, violating women, whatever, the same way that we're gonna put you away for that, I'm out here creating a pretrial diversion program so that the next kid who's about to lose his scholarship gets to keep his record clean, right? We're creating programs like the Checks Over Stripes program. I'll tell you about that in a little bit. That helps people become better, as opposed to making them, putting them on probation, giving them a bunch of rules, but then not giving them the tools to succeed, And so, like, the same day that we're out here getting a conviction in a murder case, I'm also across town signing an MOU with Augusta Tech so that we can help first-time felons get their education, get their GED, and stay out of the system, That's the piece that people don't really realize. And so for me, going back to the first Black thing, I know that what comes with the territory is a whole bunch of people who aren't going to trust you, a whole lot of people that aren't going to believe in you, or they're going to try and tear down your work just because they never meant for the face of justice to look like yours, you know? But with that comes the responsibility to do it the right way, because the people who put you in that position are the ones that you really need to worry about and that you need to be working and fighting for them.
Definitely. I like that answer. And I like that approach to everything you just said too, because like when I ask questions, I'm gonna be honest with you. When I ask people like, hey, any questions for Jared? Any question for Jared? That's the one I seen was like, ask him, do he think he's tough enough on crime? So you said it, and it's funny because I had that question like five of my threads. And I think, like you said, if reason why like doing this podcast is a big deal to me, besides the first Black and it being Black History Month and I'm a Black platform, and I also often see on other platforms that I don't support, so I don't say names too often, but on other platforms I just feel like all you get is a bad rap, nothing else, you know. So the stuff you just mentioned, if you don't say it now, we won't know about it. And
right.
if we get all our information from said platforms,
Right.
you know,
Right.
and you would think because you are the DA, you would think because some of these platforms support, I'm gonna just say the sheriff, and they give him Q&A or whatever the case may be, you would think that it would be some kind of togetherness, you know, unity there. It's a big disparaging gap I see in just how our people may be portrayed in the media. And luckily for me, I don't go off that, you know.
Yeah.
And I always tell myself, I said, when I interview him, I want to interview him just to him. I don't care about necessarily like cases or why this, why that. I just want somebody to get a fair judgment of who you are just based off just talking,
Hey,
you
man,
know.
I appreciate the opportunity.
No, and that's always been my thing. I seen it like since before you. Just when I feel like once you won, it was a wrap. Like I don't care what you would have did. You said 80%, right? I've never heard that before. I never heard that you did 80% or y'all won 80% of cases. What I do know is you won. It was some bitterness between, you know, whatever society. I think you said in the beginning it was over Columbia County.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a thing no more, right? That was quick, right?
That was real quick.
I've never seen anything happen that quick before.
They filed that paperwork before I got sworn in, man.
Let me ask you, I hate to jump the, no, yeah, I jumped the gun for now. Yeah, like, how did that make you feel during that time when it was you winning? You should be basking in celebration. It's like, hey, hold on, yeah, no, we don't want them. No fair shot.
Yeah, I mean, so that was the thing that I think stuck the most. Well, really two things. One was, you know, my folks live out in Grovetown, so like I was running to be their DA too, and now I'm not. But then two, it was the piece of like I was at new DA school, which they do the month before you get sworn in, like when that news broke. So like I'm here trying to learn how to do the job, and I'm already getting people opposing me and kind of judging me before I even get in the position. So, you know, that was the piece that kind of stuck out. But I'll tell you this, man, like we are one community, whether you believe it or not, and whether you want that to be or not. I mean, you might live over there, but you work and you play here in Richmond County, right? And then, you know, so we're close to Burke County. You know, Burke County's in my circuit too. But I mean, we are all one community, and we're sharing some of the same problems and some of the same issues. And so, I think sometimes it's short-sighted to do that. But on the other hand, you know, the reality is when you're not forced to cater to those who already are intentional about disagreeing with you and are determined not to see progress. I mean, it is sometimes a weight lifted.
I was gonna ask you, like, you know, that was a question I had was why didn't Columbia County want you? But I think a better question is like just the media aspect of things, right? From that side of town, rather. Without even, I just feel like it's never a thing where you hear any good. I was trying to look for some good articles today. I'm not gonna lie, I was trying to look for some, right? Just see like maybe somebody said something good. I'm just not seeing it. I found maybe one, and it wasn't just good. It was like conviction, but it didn't really put that you did anything good. It was just like conviction here. But as you click the link, you kind of see that they have to kind of say your name. Yeah. How hard is it to not respond to that kind of stuff?
Man, let me tell you. So I'm not like, obviously, I'm not afraid to speak my mind or to stand up for what I believe in. But sometimes it doesn't serve just to clap back at everything. But so a lot of stuff I just let go. I just let it roll off my shoulder, mainly because I'm busy. Like, I'm so busy doing the work of public safety that I just don't spend a whole lot of time and mental energy on public opinion, right? And so I'm going to do what's right. I'm going to do what's going to allow me at the end of my time as DA to look myself in the mirror and to look at I want to answer to God one day and know that I did this to the best of my ability and I did it the right way and not the way that was politically expedient, right? But there's some things that do kind of bug me, and one of them sticking out right now, so I'm gonna share it with you. I can't even remember who published it, but it was a story about a conviction, and it was like praising the judge. This judge is so good for the sentence that he gave the person, and number one, the sentence that they said he gave was incorrect. And two, how do you think he got the chance to sentence that person if we didn't go into court and win the case so that you could sentence him, right? Like the same publication had an article bashing me for not being tough enough, but then praising this judge for this sentence. Like, I'm like, y'all aren't even trying to be intellectually honest. Yeah. And so once you realize that that's what people are on and that they're not going to deal with you fairly, I mean, you just write them off. You just forget about it.
But just in an opinion sense, and let me know what you think. Like, I would think that it would be in everybody's benefit to just have that unity, because every person, your job, the sheriff's job, whatever they want to do, that concerning the week or whatever, how they want to do stuff, everybody's job is kind of like, it's kind of centered around just criminal justice and society and the community, and whether it's creating awareness, putting people out, making a better community, all that stuff is intertwined. So you would think that everybody on the same page.
You're absolutely right. Number one is everybody's job is linked to criminal justice, right? Because it all is intertwined. Public health is an issue. Mental health is an issue. Education, all those things impact crime. So you're right about that. And you're doubly right because so I was talking to a civic group today, and there was a prominent member of the media there, and I wasn't really trying to like say anything to him, but someone asked, what was the biggest surprise once you became DA? And I said, well, I didn't realize that at the same time I'm trying to fight crime, I also had to fight the media.
Ooh.
And then I kind of looked at him, which I shouldn't have done that. But but I mean, it's like, we could work together better if we could just agree that you might think I should do it this way and I might think I should do it that way. But if we're both trying to get to the same place, let's at least work together. Right. And there's not a single person who wants to live in a less safe community, right? Like, my parents live here. My grandma lives in Richmond County. I want Richmond County to be the safest place ever. I got loved ones in Burke County. I want that to be the safest place ever. And even though they're not my district anymore, I want Columbia County to be the safest place ever. And so if we could work together and if we could quit pretending as though we are at opposite ends, we could get a lot more done. But that doesn't get clicks and that doesn't sell. And there are some pretty obvious moves to discredit Black leadership in our community. Mm-hmm. And so there's a reason for all that. And no weapon formed against us shall prosper.
Definitely. Just a question. I don't have no backstory to this question. Just asked. I don't know. But how closely does or not does the DA have to work with the police force?
Very closely, man. So part of my job is to advise law enforcement, right? So it's routine that somebody will call a member of our office to get an opinion about something, or to request a subpoena for something. We assist them with orders or sometimes language and warrants. I mean, it is supposed to be a partnership. And one of the things that I care deeply about is restoring trust in law enforcement, because, I mean, we've lost that. And we lost that based on the actions of some people who really, you can't even blame the community for having lost that trust, right? Like it lays squarely in the feet of law enforcement that there's that disconnect between law enforcement and the community, right? And so I think there are some real efforts to change that. And I mean, I'm telling you, man, unfortunately, I'm not proud about this, and I hope this doesn't get, out there as something negative, but I have indicted a lot of officers. I've charged a lot of officers, and I don't take any joy in that. We don't have enough as we speak. So obviously I don't like taking more off the streets.
Yeah.
But the reality is people in this community have to know that even the ones with the badges are going to be held accountable.
Yeah.
And so to me, the benefit of getting that trust back and earning that trust back is worth whatever the fallout is in charging an officer. But most of the time, I'm not the one initiating those charges. You know who's charging the officers first? Their colleagues, the sheriff. I mean, Sheriff Roundtree has charged a lot of his own people because he's trying to restore that trust, and he's trying to make it clear that this is not the type of office that'll sweep some stuff under the rug.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, I have to give props where it's due, because, I mean, if people wanted to just bury it, it could be buried, But, I mean, we just had arrests very recently of some officers for doing things that they shouldn't have. And, until we get to a point where the community can trust everyone, it's going to continue.
I know, and I see it a lot in the prisons, the jail over here, and I don't know, like if like just laws didn't make me not want to go to jail, the stories from the jail make me not want to go to jail. It's been insane.
I ain't going.
It's been insane, and I don't, and I know it's the guards and stuff, and then so I think he's doing a good job on that as well. So definitely, like I said, I get props with to do as well. Shout out to him for that. But I want to go back real quick to just the first black. So when you ran your first when you won, what did you run on? Like, what was your I'm gonna say gimmick. I think that's a weird word. But what was your story? Yeah. All
right. So this is the piece that people don't listen to. So get it. My slogan was SMART on crime. And SMART was an acronym. And I spent all this time and all this money developing these videos and this website so people could learn what SMART on crime meant. It stood for strategic, measured, accountable, reasonable, and get this, tough, right? Mm-hmm. And, the point was I was running so that we could have the type of district attorney's office that could tell the difference between the monsters you got to take out and the people you need to help out. Because if I learned anything as a defense attorney, it was that the majority of my clients weren't bad people. They made bad decisions.
Yeah.
Right. But I've represented some people who were bad, that did some terrible, evil things. Right. But for the most part, those were the outliers. When I'm representing the 17-year-old kid that's pulling on door handles, I don't see him as an evil person. He's a young man that didn't finish his education, doesn't have a steady job, and probably needs a little home training, right? And so that's why I work to create programs that address his problems, because the prison cell ain't gonna do it.
Right.
And so I ran on that, and I think people heard SMART. And this was 2020. You got to remember, this is a very heated election.
Oh, yeah.
This is Trump versus the rest of us, right? And so all of the down ballot candidates on the other side had the same playbook, the same type of attacks that Raphael Warnock was getting, I was getting, right? So there was radicaljared.com. They would play with my name, and they'd be like, they would take the Jared Jewelers sign and they'd be like, child molesters, they went to Jared.
That's crazy. That's insane.
They put a lot of money into this, and they would send out mailers with my face. Just
that's
ridiculous
kind of come with the territory,
man.
I guess, too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when you have a whole, because that was a November election, so when you have a whole year of them just setting this narrative, it sticks. There are people who, when I tell that number, 48% versus 80%, their head explodes because they can't. They're like, but you're the one who just lets them all go. Because that's the narrative that they've gotten and that they've been fed. And I'll take my own ownership of it. Is I could have done more in my first couple years to try and reach back out to those people across the aisle and let them see the real me. To be fair, I was a bit busy, building an office, but still, I think you just can't let people set narratives for you. And unfortunately, that's the way that our political system works. It's all about othering the other side.
Right. I hate to. I'm gonna just read it just to read it. I don't want to necessarily respond to it. I want to ask you something about it. And this might be funny. Say congratulations. It says I'll be waiting to see how many jobs you create for the youth, how many kids you put in the classroom instead of courtrooms, and of course, how far you reduce crime. That was your platform. And I guess they're being funny trying to say that. Reducing crime, is that actually the job of the DA? Is that your job to solely reduce crime, or do you come in when crime is already done?
Well, okay. So if you take the traditional approach to prosecution, then you have no chance as a prosecutor of reducing crime because all you're doing is reacting to crime.
My point is that, okay.
And so I might be able to reduce crime. So we had 2 gang members last week who we convicted for killing a man out in Hephzibah. I can reduce their crime because they're not getting out, right? But that's not a win because we still lost the young man that they killed, right?
Right.
And they are leaving behind kids who now are statistically more likely to end up in the system, right? And so to me, if you're going to do it the right way and not the traditional way, you should consider it your job to reduce crime. And you do that by being proactive. You do that by spending as much time as you do in the courtroom out in the community talking about these issues and talking to kids. There's gangs in the schools. Prosecutors ought to be in the schools too. Law enforcement ought to be in the schools too. Community leaders need to be in the schools too. And so I do. That's an added burden that I'm willing to take on because I just think it's that important. This reacting to crime is insufficient. It's inadequate to really make a safer community. And so understanding that there's a cycle of incarceration and understanding that we have the tools, if we want to use them, to break that cycle, that's what we ought to be doing. And so that's why you will see me always in a classroom. That's why you will see me building programs like Checks Over Stripes, because I want youthful offenders to make their first time in the system their last time.
Well, talk about that. You said it's called Checks Over Stripes.
Yeah. So Checks Over Stripes is a program.
Is that what I heard Drake said in that song?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm making sure. I think about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, that's actually where the name comes from. But it's helping young people choose paychecks over ending up in the prison stripes.
Okay. I like that. Okay.
And so that's, so you were talking about Rel earlier. He's good friends with my brother, Kevin. Not my blood brother, but my brother. And he also is my chief ADA, and he runs my violent crimes unit. He's the one who got the conviction last week. But he and I would talk about clients, because at the time we were both defense attorneys. We'd talk about these issues of who we see coming through the system all the time. And there's three main deficits we always see in their lives, the common denominators, if you will: lack of education, lack of economic opportunity, and lack of what I call ecosystemic values, but what my grandma would call just good home training, right?
Okay.
And so the Checks Over Stripes program was just a something that we devised over conversations over years, right? But the goal is this. So we partner with a private business that's going to give so-and-so a job day one. We partner with Augusta'S to help them get their GED or their high school diploma. And that's a free service that they have through the adult education program. And then lastly, we partner with the community organizations around the CSRA that can help teach things like financial literacy, how to write a resume, how to tie a tie, the things that I had the privilege of learning in my home that a lot of the people that we're seeing come through the system don't. And so it's about addressing the root causes of crime as opposed to just reacting after the fact. Because the reality is, to my client who was pulling on door handles, the law allows the prosecutor to put that person in prison for 15 years. The reality is he's going to be there for like 24 months, but he's going to be there long enough to join a gang, to experience trauma, and then bring all that back to our community and keep committing crimes. I'd rather we do something better. I'd rather, instead of being tough, be smart.
So I'm glad you said that. And I should have actually pulled it up, but I'm not. And I was seeing something on Twitter the other day. So just let's start there, right? It's Twitter. But it was another podcast. You know, everybody got a podcast now. So, but they were talking, and the girl made sense. The video cut off, very strange, but it cut off. And she was talking about how she wasn't for certain, I don't know if it was certain people or just not going to jail, like don't send people to prison. And they were saying, wow, like it was a certain crime, don't send them to prison. Now I thought she was gonna say kill them or something because the crime was kind of heinous. I'm like, why not send them to prison? And she made a good point about why not. And it's kind of what you were saying, like once you go there, it's like we've come from a culture of where it should have been rehabilitation. And that seems to be no longer. It seems to be like you go there and you just like, it's like another word in itself to an extent. You're getting into crimes, or you unsafe, it's unsafe conditions, or you getting into gangs and you getting the whole time you're supposed to get. So you don't rehabilitate. You might spend half of your 3 years, and within the 15 or whatever, how many months, you done turn into a whole new person, but not for the better.
Yeah.
So then you come back, and then you got recidivism because you're going back in it anyway. Because when you come back, you're even worse than you was before. They should have just kept you out the first time. Right.
Especially if they're going to give you the tools that you need in order to succeed.
Right.
Right. Because
tools are important. That's important.
So that's why probation alone won't fix it, right? Because probation is, all right, you weren't doing well before. You were breaking the law before. And now we're going to add all these extra rules, and we're going to expect you to do better.
And ask you
right?
for a fee.
Right, for a fee. So we give you all the rules, but none of the tools to actually succeed.
Right.
And so that's why this program is built around the first offender structure. So we're targeting emerging adults, 17 to 25, because the data, the science says that if you felonize somebody during those years, the likelihood of them staying in that cycle of incarceration, astronomical, through the roof. The likelihood of getting them to stop committing crimes, if you felonize them then, very low, right? And so how do we get the benefit? Well, first offender allows you to not become a felon. But rather than just putting you on probation, we're now helping you get a job, we're helping you learn life skills, and we're also helping you get your education. And after 18 months, which is about half of what your typical probation sentence would be, if you've done everything you're supposed to, kept going to work on time, doing everything, we discharge the felony early. And so now you're eligible to go do things like take that apprenticeship at the electrical trades, or to learn how to weld, or apply for an office job, whatever it might be.
I mean, this is a clean background.
It's
that
a
helps.
clean background.
You can get a job.
And 18 months of work history and your education and a diploma, I mean, all of those things, that we're talking about generational transformational impact just by saying, you know what? Rather than focusing just on what they did, let's focus on who they are. and how we can stop them from doing that thing again.
Question: this program, has any outlet ever put that on the front page? Say, hey, look at this program we got going on. Like,
They haven't. We're actually doing a press conference on it at the end of this month because it's a brand new program.
okay, cool. Yeah. I'll be on the lookout to see if
Hey,
any
man.
other.
I'll invite you out. Come on.
You know what I'm saying? And I like that. I like the initiatives. I read that post because you was talking about that initiative that you're working on and you're gonna come out with. But that post made me think of the fact that people often think that they think whatever you run on, if you win, you're just not gonna do anyway. And I don't think they really take into account how much work has to be done to sometimes reverse whatever's going on anyway, so you get somewhere.
Man.
I mean, that's not even just in law. I'm talking retail, whatever. Like a new manager coming to the store. The last manager wasn't that great, whatever. That manager's coming in. They have to reprogram or do things the right way. So it takes some reversing first. Like they don't just come in there getting things done. You come in there, people not liking you because you're changing the environment, changing the culture for the better because maybe things are being done the wrong way. It's the same in law. It'd be the same thing.
Yeah. I like the way you said that, reverse, because, I mean, if someone drives the car into a ditch, you got to back it up before you can start going forward again.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, you got to back it up and get it back straight into the road.
Yep.
And I mean, that's a lot of what we spend our time doing. And then also, I mean, we were coming in on the heels of COVID, you know, courtrooms still shut down, and a circuit split on top of that, you know, the Great Resignation on top of that. You know, I can make all the excuses, but I want to go back to what you said about, you know, people don't think people, once they get in power, are going to do things.
Mm-hmm.
There's a brand of politician that I think is all too popular where they really only care about the position and not about the people that they serve. The reason I'm not that way is not because I'm just so great, but because I'm very practical, okay? It's a lot of work to run a campaign, to beat an incumbent, to just to be a public servant and available to people all the time because people just don't expect you to have a life of your own at all, right? It's just not worth all that work just to be in a position that pays me less than I could make in private practice, right?
Right.
I'm here because it's service. I'm here because God called me to it. I'm here because I see a problem and I want to fix it. The second that I don't think I can fix it, or the second that I don't think it's worth the effort, you know, I'll say, look, somebody better should do this, right? But I can't understand just sitting in the seat and not making the changes because that's, I mean, why?
Yeah,
you know,
makes sense.
I mean, you know, you got to watch people who are just looking for positions. And unfortunately, you know, I mean, there's a lot of people out here who are running for these seats and doing things just because they want a parking spot at the courthouse, not because they actually want to put in the work. Because I was in a forum, which is what we call our debates down here, and someone was saying, well, you know, when I'm DA, I'm gonna go to schools and I'm gonna work with the kids. I'm like, not only are we doing that right now, but you don't have to be DA to do that. You don't have to be an elected official to do that. You could be there right now.
That's
in
the truth.
fact, when I was in private practice, where was I? Going and talking to the kids at the schools. Because I believe in that. It's not about politics, you know? Like if you can find those politicians who are willing to actually serve the people, we could do away with a lot of the problems that we have.
Right.
I mean, just like I look at let's get out of the local situation for a second and just go to national politics. You know, there's so much that both sides do agree on, but once the cameras turn on, they have to be, you know, I mean,
like WWF.
they're basically stunting for the gram, man. Like, they know that we have an issue of labor in this country and that we need documented workers to come in and work, but they don't want to agree on that. So the people who own farms are sitting there like, man, what are we supposed to do? I mean, it's the same thing just with a lot of different issues. People are pretending like we don't have an issue with gun violence in this country. You know, they're quick to say, oh, gangs, but they don't want to talk about guns, you know? And so we're looking at us being one of the countries of all the countries that are comparable to us economically, socially, democratically. We have 4 times the amount of gun violence as any of them. And when are we going to recognize that we have an actual issue that we're just, playing possum with?
Damn, that's a stat I didn't know. And actually, speaking of stats, so, and I don't know how to find this information at all, but if somebody wanted to find information like on crime in Augusta, like year by year or consensus, is there some way they can go just to find that information, or do they have to ask an actual lawyer or DA, or I don't know. I know sometimes like in some, like the Augusta Chronicle might do end of the year, or sometimes we'll get like end of the year breakdown, or if we get too much crime, they say, well, last week up until this year we had this versus this. But how could you just find that information if you wanted to? I just feel like that's important to people, because a lot of times we get information from the media, and the media only going to put out sometimes whatever narrative they want to put out. Right. So like I said, the 80%, I would never have known that if you didn't tell me that. Right. Because I've never seen it in no publication with your name. I always see whatever they don't like that you done, or whatever they like you said. So
I know that the FBI will regularly publish stuff, but we're talking about getting into the granular of Augusta. That's hard. I actually don't know that there is a good way for you to access that information, at least in a digestible form.
Right.
So I know I need to double check my numbers, but I'm pretty sure we had about 200 fewer felony cases sent to our office last year than the year before. So that tells me we're on the right trend.
Right.
But year to year, it's kind of hard just to pull out that data. And I'll tell you, one of the issues that I hope I can fix in the next 4 years, for my office at least, is there's no one who's paid just to manage the data, and so if you're going to be making policy, if you're going to be making requests of the county for additional funding, whatever, it should be tied to actual data and statistics. But I would have to pull someone out of a courtroom to do that, or out of an investigative role to do that. And so there should probably be a full-time data analyst.
I mean, I don't know how this works, but I'm just asking. You couldn't just make that a position. I don't know how this works. So if you can't, just let me know. But that couldn't just be a position, and then somebody get hired for it, or you have to go through what's the thing? What I learned in school? 3 branches of government type stuff.
So
checks and balances.
I have to ask the county to create that position for me, because I can't fund it with my state budget. So I handle different budgets. My state budget has, there's statutes that deal with what positions they can pay for. And so counties have a little more flexibility, but that's still asking, another governmental body to say, hey, I know that you need X amount more garbage trucks, but I need this data person over here. We are all your department heads, all of your elected officials, we're all kind of lobbying for our different offices. And so it's tough. It's tough to make asks like that.
And not to cut you, I would wonder if maybe, and it's just me thinking as a person who just live here, maybe it could be a Chronicle or just online, because we look at online stuff now too, where maybe every quarter we can get quarterly numbers. So whereas at least we can say, well, last quarter, just like retail, just like any other business, you get your quarter numbers. So maybe at the end of a quarter we can get how many homicides we had this year, how many felony crimes we had this year, just things like that. So we at least know what's going on as the year progresses. I know weekly would probably be too much, because sometimes it's slow weeks. Slow weeks is good though, but I'm just saying sometimes it's slow weeks.
Well, yeah, and then there's also you have to be careful about knee-jerk reactions. So in 2020, when I was talking about criminal justice reform, people were like, yeah, we're coming on the heels of Ahmaud Arbery and George Floyd, Breonna Taylor. So people that was the public consciousness. But then as we're going through COVID some more and that crime spiked, and particularly homicide spiked, then you started to hear people talking more about, man, it's time to crack down. It's time to lock people up, and it's like we can't allow the natural changes and the natural ebbs and flows to be shaping our policy. We can't have a knee-jerk response to what is a long-term trend. Like crime in this country is trending down in a lot of meaningful metrics, but the COVID spike was a real thing, and people, I think sometimes we've been preconditioned to think that the appropriate response to crime is simply the prison cell, as opposed to.
I was in a training today, and something that's why I couldn't text back earlier. I was in a training, and they said something. I'm thinking what you're saying now is high expectations versus high pressure. So, the expectation is, of course you want crime down, you want this, that, and third. But that knee-jerk reaction you're talking about is the pressure, because now there's so much going on that we're being reactive instead of being proactive, So just set the high standard and go from there. But then when things not going away, or we feel like crime is higher because the media or whatever, or we see, in Augusta, I know it's small, but we see 3 murders in 2 months. It's like, oh my God, the world is ending. So then you want to call your name or say they ain't doing their job, this person ain't doing their job. But really, it's just, sometimes that's how it go, But you can't really make decisions off just high pressure, You got to kind of think the long term, and then not just right now, just for the future as well. Which I like what you said about crime, and being tough and versus being smart, right? When people ask about the toughness of crime, what in your mind, to them, maybe you can speak for them, I don't know. What do you assuming they mean when you say be tough on crime? Are they expecting you to throw the book at every single person? Like, if you grab a car door, lock them up for 15 years. If you, like, what's being tough and what's not?
Let me tell you, man. I think I know what people think they mean. I think in their minds, people are making decisions about crime. Criminals are making decisions about their actions based on rational thought and rational, kind of well thought out plans. Mm-hmm. And that's just not the reality of what most crime is. It's passionate. It's in the moment. And so what we see. So I'll just tell a story. I was a defense attorney, and I represented a guy who couldn't read or write.
Oh man!
And he was 60-something years old, pours concrete for a living. But statistically, he's an anomaly, because statistically, with him not having those educational backgrounds, he should have been a felon like 1,000 times over. Right. But he wasn't. He worked really hard. He provided for his family. Church-going guy, and but he had one problem. He had a suspended license, and the only way that he could pay it back was to go to work. Well, you go to work, you got to drive there. You drive to work, you get caught, boom, another suspended license. Happens again, boom. But this time, it's a felony.
Oh, wow.
And I had an assistant district attorney in this circuit tell me, well, probation's not working, so he's just going to have to go to prison.
That's insane.
I'm talking about no felony history, over 60 years old, and his only offense is driving on a suspended license. You want to put him in prison? Bro, let me tell you, they held that line, and that's what tough means, right? Like that's what being tough means. That's a very tough sentence. It's also dumb. It's also counterproductive. It's actually more likely to produce future crime and criminality than just saying, hey, let's press pause. Rather than entering this felony on his record, why don't we just wait, let him raise the $3,000, however many dollars it was for him to pay for his license, let him physically go to a license place, to take his test because he has to go at a certain time because he can't read or write.
Right.
So he can't just take the test like a normal person does. Like, why doesn't somebody just stop long enough to figure out why he keeps doing the same thing and help him stop doing that? You know? But I think when people hear tough, they think that the person who drives on a suspended license is the same as the person who breaks into the cars, and who is the same as the person who deals drugs out of their cars. And they think that all of it, if you just are really, someone said, if you don't sweat the small stuff, if you just take it all super seriously, that all these people are going to stop committing crimes. Well, that would be true if the mandatory minimums had ever worked. I mean, we've had mandatory minimums for decades. Do you think we're winning the war on drugs?
No, not at all.
Yeah, not at all. You know, but I still have legislators and fellow DAs from across from the state talking about, you know, we need more mandatory minimums. Are you out of your mind? You know, like, all we've done is manage to become the most incarcerated nation, and still, like I said, not even close to being one of the safest for the amount of wealth that we have in this country. And so that's a very long way of saying I think people think tough on crime means you can scare people out of doing what their poverty, what their mental health, what their substance use disorder, whatever it might be, is dictating that they're gonna do.
Yeah.
Right? And I think also sometimes we fall into the trap of grading people on a rubric that doesn't apply to them because their circumstances growing up were just vastly different, you know? And their realities right now and their opportunities right now are vastly different. So you can't judge Jermaine on the same scale as you judge Kevin, right? Yeah. Because Kevin grew up differently. Kevin had a different experience, you know, and so you might be able to work really hard and have a podcast and be a positive light in the community, but he might have had, you know, multiple adverse childhood experiences throughout his life. He might have seen his dad go away at a young age. He might have seen his mom get shot in front of him. Like, you don't know. And so to try and build this kind of this rubric of what Kevin should live up to just because it works for you and your kids, it doesn't make sense. It's not just.
And I know you said a lot, and some of it seems like some people have the theory of, you know, break a crime, you're just a criminal. You know, like no matter what the crime is, you jaywalk, I want you in jail. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying? So I get that, and I think there is, I think race plays a role sometime in that too. I see sometimes, I'm trying to say the publication. In certain publications, I'll see that in the comments. I don't follow the pages, I just have to go to it sometimes. I see the comments and like, race, it just play a big part. You see a certain demographic, I'll say, and you read the article, like, okay, well, you know, I can see it, but they don't see that side in the article. It's just like, throw the book at him, or you'll see them say your name like, well, he'll be fine because Jared's the DA, 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 da. You know, and it's like, but I understand, and I guess because, like I said, I read and I look at different things culture-wise, culturally. When you're trying to build a culture, it's different things you got to look at. You can't look at something at face value all the time. Sometimes there's other extenuating factors you have to think about. So when you say you trying to save a kid, or, you know, maybe a dad that has multiple kids and he did something small, I can see why you don't throw the book at that person, because it can have a trickle effect on other things. So not only thinking about my term now, I'm thinking about long term. I'm thinking about how this may impact this person. So you tell the story. I do want to tell you this one thing. I had a guy on, I'll say his name because he's on before. I actually seen the podcast. Shout out to him. His name is Evan. And I did more research after doing the podcast with him, like 2 years later, right? And it was a good episode. It did really, really well. Cool guy. He had just came home from doing like 6 years on a 15-year sentence from something he did when he was 16. He didn't get a chance to graduate. You know, like he just had to go. He finished school, but he had to, the next month went to jail. That was it. Like his sentence was done. Felt bad for him as he talked about it. But like you said sometimes crime is done on spur of the moment. He told me the story, whether it's true or not, you know, but whatever. But the story was, he said, you know, the guy, his neighborhood was like, yo, I'm about to go to Columbia County and go to this gas station and rob it. I'll come along. It's 2 a.m. He's 16. Already something wrong that he's out at 2 a.m. Right. So you're talking about adversaries, right? That's and life expectancy and stuff like that, and things that you have to encounter. All right, cool. That happens. pipeline from, whatever to jail. He go through it. But as I read later on in his story, something said to bring it up. In the podcast we did, he said his dad had died. I didn't ask him how. I don't ask him questions sometimes. I read a story not even 3 months ago. I promise to you. His dad died. He seen his dad die. The cops killed him in front of the house.
Wow.
I didn't get a chance to ask him because he's back in jail now. But I felt, as you saying this stuff right now, I see him and I see a lot of people that I speak to that can benefit from the things that you're saying. So whereas somebody might say that's not tough enough on crime, I also see, well, I've seen what tough that messed it up for a lot of families, a lot of other people, because they couldn't get the proper tools they needed. They didn't need tough. They needed tools.
Yeah.
So.
And let me tell you, man, it's not even a racial argument anymore, because yes, we know that you're looking at the courtroom and there's a whole lot more of us than anyone else, right? But when I talk about these things, I thought that I was going to get so much pushback from people. I remember when I was running the first time, I was walking a neighborhood out in Columbia County, and I already know what the deal is. I know that odds are stacked against me walking a neighborhood over there trying to talk about my Democratic candidacy. And this big, burly, corn-fed country dude comes out, and I'm just like, oh, man, he's about to, if not, hold me at gunpoint, he's going to, tell me about myself. And he said, hey, man, what are you going to do about these nonviolent drug offenders? You better give them a chance. And I was like, my guy, this is what I'm talking about. So there's so many people who get what we're talking about right now and understand that there's a better way to do justice. And there's Republicans, there's Democrats across the board, right? And so when I say these false dividing lines, there really is just that bad narrative. But I think the majority of Americans understand that this is the time and this is the moment to do the right things. I think we just have to seize that moment and not get in our own way,
right,
not letting the old kind of generational curses get in the way of us making the best decisions for the next generations.
So I know, like I said, you won in 2020. Now, I'm gonna ask just a general question. Now, I've seen some reasons why this and third your campaign. Some people think you won solely because you're black. Me being a black man, I'm just be honest with you, right? I don't see too many times where being black has benefited us, So when I see that, I'm like, if that's the case, I ain't too I'm not happy. I'm not too unhappy about it. But do you think that had anything to do with you winning one, or do you think it was solely just a breath of fresh air in a system that needed it?
I really do not believe that it was because I was black, and I get why some people have to tell themselves that to feel better, right? But the reality is, I pulled 32% of the vote in Columbia County. They said a Democrat, especially a young black Democrat who didn't have a name, couldn't get more than 25. Some of the biggest donors and contributors to my campaign were Republicans.
Oh, wow.
But saw the difference between, there's talking tough and then there's actually being effective at reducing crime. And we've gotten a whole bunch of talking tough and not a whole lot of efficacy, right? There's a lot of people who recognized that you ought to be able to access your DA. You ought to be able to hear what they have to say about things and not just be told to buzz off. And so I just don't believe that. I mean, I lived it. And so I just know that when I was walking neighborhoods in Pepper Ridge, they weren't talking about, oh, you black, I'm going to vote for you. They're like, well, what are you going to do? What are you going to do different? Because that's what people, especially our people, are starved for, is for people to actually get in power and do the right things and not just try and protect their seats. There would be a really easy way for me to just, if I wanted to do it the easy way, If I wanted to appease them folk and just keep things how it were, I would not have a challenger right now. I'd be safe. I also would not have changed anything for the better. I would have wasted this God-given opportunity to bring change to a system that desperately needed it. And so Black people don't vote as a monolith the way that they think we do. We don't just vote color the way that they think we do. And I know that because even to this day, people want to know, who are you?
Yeah.
Who your people, but also, what are you doing for me? What are you doing to change things and make them better? If people just voted by their color, Kamala Harris would have won the nomination in 2020. You know what I'm saying? Like, that's not what it's about. So
you make a good point. I'm not going to say too much on Kamala because I don't want to go there. But you made a good point, and I think to what you're saying and a lot of things that involves you, I think a lot of times people look at bigger scale stuff, but on a smaller scale. So even when you say, I'm not bringing up no particular case like that, but I know like you'll get a lot of flack for one case here or one case there. It's just them two that just be lingering. They just keep bringing them two up. Not saying I want anybody to forget about it. I'm not saying that, but we're not thinking about it sometimes, and boom, every time you do something good, like, hey, remember he did this? Remember this? So it's not a bunch of things. It's just one or two things, but they'll use that to make it be everything, if that makes sense. So I like the fact you said that Black people don't vote for Black people, because I do think, even though you're the first Black DA, we had first Black before in political or in them kind of roles, right? And I think because you had some who just didn't do what they said they were going to do, you had some who made it their business to not make Black people their constituents at all. I learned that from Kim Macon. And then you had, you got some who just didn't do right. So now when you hit a Black candidate for anything, we asking questions. We probably ask more questions than other demographics about that person, because we want to make sure we represent it right.
Right.
So like it's tougher to get the Black vote sometimes, because if you don't believe that you real, just off genuine conversation, that's enough to be like, I ain't voting for him. I don't like that. I think people say things about whether it's Roundtree or whatever, based off stuff they seen that had nothing to do with his job. Just, I seen him at Red Lobster, he was acting this way. Or I seen him on this show and he said this, them twins or whatever. Like, people really stick you to like a something small you do now, especially if you're Black, because that's how we kind of want to be represented the right way. So I think it's harder for you to have one in 2020 anyway, because that was a rough time. I mean, 2019, but that was a rough time. So even you winning, I can't say it was because you're Black. I work somewhere where I seen you doing the work a lot anyway. I think you kind of beat the streets, and you did what you're supposed to do. Which brings to my next question is like, how do you plan on like doing things this go around? Man,
you're talking about like the next 4 years?
Yeah.
Man, there's so much that still has to change, man. And I'm proud of the work that we've done. I'm really proud of it. And I say that not to big up myself, but I have really good staff and really dedicated people who have made a lot of change be possible, right? In really what is a short amount of space. 4 years goes like that. But there are still some things that I want to do. So one of the things that I said in 2020 that I still repeat to this day is kids belong in classrooms, not courtrooms. And so we created the Prosecutors in Schools program. We created the Youth Diversion to the Arts program. But we want to expand on that. So I'm having meetings with the school system about how we can be more involved on the front end. And I'm working with other community partners to try and find ways. So the Youth Diversion to the Arts program goes through Jesse Norman School, right?
Oh, okay.
And so it basically, for those who don't know, it's a bypass. It's rather than putting this kid in juvenile court, we put him with some mentors and some new peers and give him an opportunity just to shine his light in a different way, right?
Perfect.
But not every kid wants to do art. So where's the sports version of that? Where's the I mean, some kids want to work. Some kids want to start making money. Like, how do we engage with them and help them kind of get to the interests that they have, right? Because you got to meet them where they are. Some of them want to be a podcast and do all of that. And so how do we work with our different partners to expand that? But I'll tell you, man, I want to see us as a people kind of demand more by way of proactive justice and to do more in that space. And if I could have everything that I wanted, I want a full-time alternative sentencing prosecutor. Like right now, I've got some prosecutors who do it on the side, but I want a full-time person who's not just helping run the programs, but also helping us find new ones that can impact the community in a better way. Because I've got a program that deals with the emerging adults first-time offender, but there's another category of offender that we can't forget about, and that's the repeat offender.
Right.
And some people don't have any compassion for the repeat offender, but if that person never got the opportunity of a checks over stripes because it didn't exist,
I was going to ask that question. Yep.
Like how can you then expect them? There's someone who could actually benefit from it, right? Yeah. And who's done committing crimes if we give them the tools to be done. And then another thing, kind of what I'm really going to devote the next year to is restorative justice. There's a big need in our community for victim-centered restorative practices, not just in the juvenile setting, but there are some serious cases in the felony, like adult world, that victims are getting left behind, and so are defendants and their families, just because the system itself is adversarial. So imagine being a victim of a crime, and there's no way for the system to make you whole. Like putting this person in prison isn't going to help me. You know how often I hear a victim tell me, I just want to be able to ask them why me, or I just want to know. I just want them to know how much of an impact that had on me, so that maybe they think better the next time around. And there are groups, there are organizations that engage in these restorative practices. And maybe it would behoove me to explain a little bit about restorative justice if we have time. So restorative justice says the victim has to agree and want to engage with the defendant, and the defendant has to agree and be willing to engage with the victim. And offline, apart from one another, there's, I'll just say a mediator, but the restorative justice facilitator is working with the victim through their issues, also working with the defendant on the other side. And then the goal is that they come together in a group setting, and work through the defendant having to hear the impact that it took on the victim, whatever they did, right. But also the victim getting to say, this is how you can repair this harm to me, and them coming to an agreement. And sometimes that is a better result than me just saying to the victim, well, he did this, and it's worth 5 years, so we'll offer him 2 years and 3 years of probation on the back end. Like that kind of sometimes excludes the victim from the process. Yeah. And oftentimes it is unsatisfactory because they're like an afterthought. And really, if the only time the defendant gets to hear the victim impact statement is actual minutes before the judge is about to sentence him, he ain't listening to that.
Yeah, you're right.
He's worried about what the person in the black dress is about to do.
Yep.
Right? And so the studies show that it increases empathy, it increases the ability for the defendant to associate his actions with the harm that took place. And it allows the victim to actually be heard and seen and acknowledged by the defendant. And there's a lot of value in that. And so it's not right for every case. It's not right for some of our more serious cases. But there are some where that is really the best option. And it doesn't necessarily mean that the person doesn't go to prison at the end of the day. You know, it doesn't necessarily mean that they don't, take the charge or whatever, or have to pay the money back, whatever it is. But it just gives the victim a greater voice and a more agency in the process. And the studies show the instance of recidivism is lower when you do a restorative practice. And they do it a lot in schools. That's kind of one of the main places where you'll see restorative justice practices. But there's a really good application for adults too. And we're trying to partner with organizations to make that a reality for our circuit. Because right now, there's no one in the CSRA that's doing that I'm aware of.
I was going to say, just hearing how you explained it, to me, it would seem like that would actually help with more with the rehabilitation as well, to know that, to sit with that. Even if you're going to do some time still, to be able to sit with that during that time would also help with rehabilitation. It's your way of thinking and just knowing how your actions impacted somebody else's life. I think a lot of times that's not a thing. You don't get that side.
And a lot of time the victims need rehab too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
I mean, like it's a really traumatic experience to have someone enter your home without your permission. You know?
Yeah.
Like, or even your car. That's a level of violation that most people aren't dealing with or aren't expecting to deal with when it happens. And I mean, for them to have a voice and for them to have the opportunity to dictate what making it right looks like.
Yeah.
Not just based on what some statute says, but like on what, we're going to come together and I'm going to tell you what it means for you to make this right for me.
Yeah.
That's powerful, man. That gives a real opportunity.
If you was king for a day, all right, and you could snap your fingers and make one wish come true, what would that be?
Stop people from hurting other people. That would just be it, man.
Simple yet impactful.
That's honestly, man, if I could get people to stop hurting other people, the rest of this is really easy to work out, man. But that's the one thing that I think is just plaguing our community is people don't have any respect for other people's lives, for other people's bodies, for the property either. But I'm really talking about, physical crime is really, really damaging to our community.
Okay. What about your upbringing, education experience makes you the best for the job you do?
First, I got this job because God wanted me to have it. And so I'm not afraid to do it the right way, because so long as I'm doing God's will, can't nobody stop it. There's a whole lot of attacks. There's a whole lot of people trying to stop it, and they haven't been able to yet, and they're not going to be able to. Like, when God's done with me being DA, that's when I'll stop, right? So that allows me to do things that I think other people, if given the position, might be a little too afraid to do. Okay. It allows me to speak truth in rooms that other people might shy away from. It allows me to make decisions that are right and just, even when they're unpopular, and deal with the fallout, right? So that's one piece of it. And then the other is I spent time both as a prosecutor and a defense attorney and an educator. So I've seen so many different sides of it. And so that just informs the work that I do. And so I think that, for one thing, the fearlessness that only comes with faith, and the perspective that only comes with a vast experience outside of just being a prosecutor.
I give you a lot of credit too, because a lot of time when you interview, I'm gonna say people in your world, that you work in, especially politicians. I don't know about politicians, but you ask them like, "Hey, what's your favorite color?" They will not tell you a color. They will give you like a bunch of words, and they won't answer the question. But that'd be the end. They'll just stop. So I like that you just kind of answering the question, because I was unsure how it would go. I was like, I don't think he's political, but we'll see. But I like everything you've been saying is kind of clear cut. Nothing, at least not to me. I don't know. what are some unexpected challenges of the job? Like, I know we spoke about some things, but just I'm actually got some questions I wanted to run down so I can say that I answered I asked you the question. So, what are some unexpected challenges of the job?
Okay, so fighting crime while fighting the media. I told you that one before already, but we'll move that to the side for now. One of the biggest challenges is recruiting talent and recruiting diverse talent, but especially with attorneys. Attorneys are very mobile. That's a degree that allows you to just put up a sign and be a job as opposed to asking for one, right? And if you're not paying well, or if you are not providing a benefit to work in government service, the attorneys can just say, I can do bad all on my own, Pretty much every attorney who works for me, if they just decided to open their own firm tomorrow, would make more money by the end of the year than they could.
Oh, dang, yeah.
But worse than that is they make about 20 to 30 grand less than assistant district attorneys make in the metro area, right? And the reality is we're only about 7% difference cost of living from metro Atlanta. So it's a big difference, And so that's been an unexpected challenge, is in the COVID kind of great resignation that every industry saw. We really saw it amongst prosecutors, because only certain type of people want to be prosecutors in the first place. And then of those, only a very small number want to be prosecutors in the Augusta area, right? Like if you don't have a tie here, you're not necessarily seeking out Augusta when you could be in Fulton or DeKalb or wherever. So that's been a really difficult challenge. Yeah.
So I also want to ask, I know I asked earlier about the DA, but I kind of want to just get a runner. I want to revisit that a little bit. Why do you think it's important to this community, like having the actual DA, or the job of the DA? What is its importance to Augusta?
I mean, it shapes the way that justice looks for your community, man. If we just went back to the way it was always done, we'd keep locking up people for driving on a suspended license. And, the real cases that matter and impact community safety would keep getting lost. I'll tell you, just think about this, man. When I was running in 2020, there wasn't, out of 30 attorneys, there wasn't a single black assistant district attorney.
Wow.
And then when I started saying that on the campaign trail, she went and hired one. But so walking in the door just by myself, I doubled the diversity of the attorneys in the office, right? Like the problem with that is sometimes in this community, we're trying cases with witnesses and individuals and defendants who, like, you got to speak a certain language. Mm-hmm. You've got to understand what they were saying in that message that you're trying to explain to the jury proves motive, right? You've got to be able to connect with a jury pool that naturally distrusts the office of the prosecutor and law enforcement in general based on the way that they've been treated for decades, yep. Right? And so diversity is a strength. And to be honest, I forgot your original question, but
just why it's important to
so it's important to have a district attorney that not only reflects the community, but also respects the community and isn't going to bring some BS just because that's politically expedient. I got church ladies and grandmas all across this community that would have no problem calling me to the carpet if I wasn't doing it right.
Right.
And you got to have someone who's actually responsive to those people and not just hiding in their office away from the community.
I know I'm looking at some stuff now too. Veterans Court. Can you speak on that a little bit?
Yeah, man. So that's crazy. So drug court. You're familiar with drug court?
Yeah.
Basically,
Well, I ain't never been.
Yeah. You know what I mean. But you know the concept because that's the most popular one. You've got someone who's committing crimes because they have a drug problem. You put them in treatment, and if they do everything that they're supposed to, the felony goes away. They're not convicted felons. Great program, right? But Veterans Court was supposed to work the same way with one main difference. If you were a veteran and you wanted to avail yourself of that program, you had to become a felon in order to use the services. So we use the term, drug court was pre-adjudication and Veterans Court was post-adjudication. And do you know the term phantom rules?
No.
It basically, you ever heard someone say, like, why do we do it this way? Oh, we just always do it that way.
Right. I heard that. Yeah.
That's a phantom rule, right? Like, you don't actually have a rule that says you have to do it that way. It's just the way that it has always been.
Gotcha.
All right. And so what I found when I came into office was Veterans Court being post-adjudication was just a phantom rule. The only reason that it wasn't is because no one had said, hey, we should treat our veterans at least as good as we treat, our people who are suffering from drug addiction.
Right.
We should at least treat our veterans better, or at least on the same level playing field. And so we just with a signature, we made Veterans Court pre-adjudication, and now veterans can get the treatment that they need through the VA without losing their benefits of being able to go on base and avail themselves of the privileges that they earn through service to the country.
That's dope, man. It's funny, like I said, you're talking to somebody, sitting them down. That's why I do this kind of work too, because it's just to be informative, to make people aware. Like I said, it's Black History, so that you being the first Black DA is definitely commendable and respected, and it's history at the end of the day. And it's February, so of course it makes sense to do it now. Yeah. So time was just right for me, honestly. I feel like it worked out perfect, right? But at the same time, I like to just bring awareness to people. Like I said, I'm not from here, but at the same time, I be trying to show people that where I'm from, like, hey, I know y'all think it's just grass and dirt roads. It's not that. We have professional people here. We have people that's doing great things in the community here, just like anywhere else. And to me, that, like, you kind of defy the whole more than the masses as well. After everything you're doing is defying kind of everything that they say Augusta's about. You know what I'm saying? So it's really dope to see our people do it, but just it being done. Whether it's not our people or not, but it's good to see it when it's your own as well. So I definitely appreciate that.
I appreciate you saying that, man.
Nah, I mean, and the thing too, I'm not the type of media person. Like, I think, like, it's funny you say tough on crime, and I think I've when you enter like the political world, I think sometimes people expect that. They be like, okay, let's see if he asks them this. It's like, well, the job is really to make sure I get people to understand who this person is. Now, if I have a question about something, then that's a little different. But I had a couple years ago, I had a guy, Joe Trainer, I think Trainer, he passed away though.
Yeah.
And I felt bad because when I had him on, it was only audio back then. Like, this wasn't a thing back then, all this stuff. This podcast first started. Him and Jordan Johnson have his little tiff or whatever. And I spoke to Jordan before I was doing it because he called me. All right. So as I'm podcasting with Joe Trainer, he's saying things. And I guess because I'm privy to something that somebody else told me. Mind you, I don't know if it's true or not. I'm just going off the flow. I'm kind of stopping and like questioning him about it, And as I sat back and listened to it, and somebody called me, Kim Macon called me and said, hey, did you speak to somebody before you spoke to him? I told him no, right? But the reality of it is I did. And I know he can feel it because I'm not in that world. But I'm questioning as if I'm in that world. And I never want to make somebody feel like that again. Like, I felt like he had a good time and he wanted to come back on. But for me, a media person, I was like, I don't like how I probably did that. It wasn't comfortable. You should come here and kind of be comfortable and just feel like it's a good look for whatever you're trying to do, It shouldn't be like you on trial for something that you probably did and didn't do, especially if I don't know it, So I try to approach this where it's commendable, and I try to, if it's a tough question, I'm gonna ask a tough question. But at the same time, I realize I don't want anybody losing their job for a podcast either. So that's just me. I think long term, I had Alfonso Forrest on one time, and I remember the second one we did, we just took it down because I think he said he was drinking. You something you shouldn't say. I'm like, all right, I can work with you on that. You know what I'm saying? But for the most part, yeah, I just like people to be comfortable. I want people to realize that Augusta has great people and great things here as well. And that's what the platform is for. Now, other platforms are made for other reasons. You know, you can go there and get that. But here,
Yeah.
I want it to be, let me find out about them. So somebody never watched any of the debates. They don't watch nothing you ever talked about. They never seen you paving the streets to get votes and nothing like that. I want them to watch it and say, you know what? He sounds educated. I like his demeanor. Or if they don't, whether they don't, but it's a true thing. It's no gimmick here, you know? It's just organic conversation. And that's what I want. I wanted that for you because I feel like I haven't watched the other podcast you did, but media-wise, of what I've seen when it comes to you, it's been all like narratives.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't like that. So as a black media person, I was like, I gotta get this. I gotta get him right. I gotta get him right.
Well, man, I've had fun, and I really appreciate the opportunity.
Nah, definitely, man. So I know you got to run it again this year, right? So it says vote May 21st to reelect Jared Williams as our district attorney. How you feeling about that? How you feeling? Your chances are. How you feeling? These next couple months, you gotta hit the ground running and do some things, make some appearances.
Yeah, man. I feel really good. I feel good about it because I've prayed about it, and I've talked to God, because I genuinely, like, when it's my time to go, like when it's my time to move on and do something else, like, I'm not gonna be the one holding on.
Right. Right.
I truly, this is service, but I mean, like, you feel it. It is service, man. Like when you're up, I was at the office at 3:30 this morning. Like, it's service, right?
Wow.
But I don't feel good that we're still doing the same things to each other, right? Like, the person that's running against me had the opportunity to, like I said, to be in the schools already, to be doing some of this work already. But it just seems like whenever somebody gets something, we're working against each other instead of to help each other and to improve the community. And so I hate that it's kind of, we're put in these adversarial positions. And I guess to me, the only reason that it really matters is because I don't want to see the work and the progress that we've been able to create go by the wayside because somebody simply wants a position and doesn't actually want to do the work. Because I just wish there should be a rule that, like, if you're going to run for something, you got to, like, shadow the person who's doing it for a week.
I like that idea.
Just a week would give you a little taste of whether that's really what you want to do with your life. I mean, and I get it, man. It's not my seat. Like, I'm not one of those people who feels like, oh, you challenging me. Like, it is the people's seat. But if you're gonna go out for it, like, be about the people's work, and don't let that just be lip service. So I feel positive because I feel like it's still God's will for me to serve in this area. But I don't like the way that it's going to end up being, two people who probably should be working together and building something, being put in a position where at least some people are going to want us to tear each other down.
I also say in just locally and local politics and just that the world, sometimes first black also means another black is coming, or let's put another black against this person, divide and conquer. Sometimes that's what first black also means as well. Because you mentioned Obama earlier, and depending on the black person you ask, they either got great things to say about Obama or they got horrible things to say about Obama. And sometimes it's just from media. There's no due diligence of, like, I saw this, didn't like this.
Right.
I read this, I watched him say this, I didn't like it. It's more so, oh, he didn't do nothing, and this hearsay stuff that you would see in publications, But a lot of times when somebody is the first black or black and in charge or just black, whatever, right? It's a lot of divide and conquer that comes with that. And you have people putting about it and people back to do that. Like you said, I don't know the person, but I will say that I think if you need the position in order to do the work, when the work can be done without the position, there's something to say about that.
Right.
Like you said, anybody can talk. I can talk in school. I talk in school twice this month. I'm ready. I'm going to do it twice. I'm not running for DA. I don't plan to, right? But I can do the work without the title. So I definitely agree with you on that. I think that's something to be looked at, I think.
For every Warnock, there's a Herschel Walker.
Hey man, but look, I definitely wish you the best. I think you're doing great things. Obviously, I hate that you have to fight the media. You know what I'm saying? But this is not one you have to fight. All right.
Well, I appreciate that. Can I say one more thing?
Definitely.
Man? And I'm gonna try not to get emotional when I say it, but our community lost a giant this past week, and the first lawyer I ever got to shake his hand and he looked like me was Ed Tarver. And he recently passed unexpectedly. And I just want to encourage the people that listen to you to pray for his family, pray for our community, because we lost a good one. And we lost somebody who not only was about being a first, but also was about bringing other people up behind him so that they could be a first. And I'm the beneficiary of his tutelage and his mentorship.
No, definitely. Rest in peace and definitely condolences to his family.
Yeah,
definitely, man.
Well, I appreciate you, man. I didn't mean to end on a sad note,
good,
but
man.
I just, I that's really important to me.
Well, a good note, go vote for Jared Williams. You know what I'm saying? May 21st.
May 21st, baby. Support your DA in May.
There you go. All right, man. More Masters podcast. But yeah, I appreciate you coming through, man.